The Creative Psychotherapist is the official podcast of the Creative Clinicians Corner, a practice-building resource for creative psychotherapists. TCP Podcast is the cast for creative, expressive, and experiential-focused psychotherapists curious to learn how to design, build, and scale a thriving private practice. Your host, Raina Lombardi, interviews successful therapists about the tools and strategies they have used to develop creative-focused practices. They also talk about the products, services, and side hustles they have developed using their knowledge and creativity to enhance their therapy practices, make a greater impact in their communities, and diversify their income streams. Welcome. Now here's your host, Raina Lombardi. Welcome, Creative Psychotherapist podcast listeners. A mouthful there. This is our last episode of the season before we go on a little summer hiatus. And so if you're listening, please welcome my next guest. Her name is Jasmine Parker Rodriguez, and she is another Florida-based art therapist. And she works in my hometown of St. Pete, which is exciting to see art therapy taking root in my hometown, because when I was growing up, there wasn't a lot of visibility. But welcome, Jasmine. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
So would you, for folks that maybe aren't familiar with who you are, would you share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what makes your practice a little different than maybe other art therapy practices?
Yes, absolutely. So again, as Raina said, my name is Jasmine. I'm a registered art therapist, and I've been a registered art therapist for about maybe 10 years now, something like that. I'm the owner of Listen to Your Art Therapy and Empowerment Services, and we've been in practice since 2019. I work with young adults and adolescents predominantly, and I offer both individual, family, and group therapy services. And probably the most unique thing about my business is that I'm mobile. I built a mobile art studio. One of my business's goals is to try to minimize as many barriers as possible when it comes to providing services for my clients. And so I came up with the idea to build a mobile art studio, so that way I can just kind of take my whole office to my clients. So that way they didn't have to worry about transportation or if I was too far from them. It just kind of made life a little bit easier and made my services a little bit more accessible for the people that I was working with.
Awesome. So for folks that are listening, could you describe what your mobile studio looks like and how that works?
Absolutely. So I bought a travel trailer. So it's the type that you actually hook up to like a truck or a SUV, and you pull and tow it. The studio that I bought was actually meant to be a tiny house. So the couple that we bought it from had already gutted it out. And so that was good because that was less work for us. And I pretty much just kind of designed the space with my clients in mind. I wanted it to be very much like an open studio format. So in the space, there's tons and tons of art materials in there, pretty much any and everything that my clients may want to use during a session. We have running water. We have electricity. We have a TV in there. So sometimes we like to jam out, listen to some music while we're in a session. And again, like I said, there's tons of art supplies. The front part of the studio is kind of more of my group space, so to speak. It's a little bit more open, which I love because it allows for my clients to kind of be able to spread out so they don't have to feel confined to one area. So they kind of have like a lot of working space to create. And then the back part is where I consider more like my little office space. And back there is where I have my comfy couch and my little pillows and things like that. And so we will sometimes sit in the back, especially if I'm having a session where they're not necessarily wanting to create that day. I tend to have a lot of other like just fidgety things where people can just kind of still interact, still use their hands and still express themselves if they're not necessarily in the making art mood at that time. So it's pretty much kind of the layout of the space. It's pretty wide open. The trailer is about 22 feet long, and it's between, if I remember correctly, I think it's between like 8 to 10 feet wide. So it's a pretty good space.
That's a big, it really is a big size.
Mm-hmm.
What have you learned that you didn't anticipate when you kind of thought, oh, this is a great idea. I'll get a trailer. I'll, retro outfit it so that it will serve as a studio, tow it to where my clients are. What are some things that you've learned? Because I imagine there's some like troubleshooting with this process of like, you think it's going to be one way and then.
Yes. So there was a lot of learning involved. First and foremost, I had never pulled a trailer. So that was a big learning experience, especially the backing up. I'm still not that great at backing because it's totally opposite of what your brain tells you how you should turn the wheel.
Yeah.
It's not that. So it's definitely a retraining of the brain. And so ideally, I try to find spaces where I can just pull in and pull off versus having to back up. But I've done better at it. I definitely have learned a lot. One of the things that I often, when people contact me and just want to ask questions about it, one of the things I encourage them, I say, if you can get something that drives, I would recommend getting something that drives because it takes time to hook it up to the truck and to unhook it. And with me traveling, I have to take that into consideration because if it's a rainy day, it could take a little bit longer to get hooked up or unhooked. And again, if I'm traveling, I have to take that into consideration of my time so that way I can still arrive to my appointments on time. And also just pulling it, that's also an adventure. It's heavy. It's not super heavy because I don't have a lot of heavy materials. We didn't use a lot of heavy materials to build it because we knew it would be on the road. But it's still heavy in the sense that it's a trailer. And so if you're not used to towing something so big behind you, you can't go fast. So don't get in the fast lane. Get in the slow lane. And again, kind of anticipate that in terms of your time as well in order to be able to get to your appointments on time. And then also one thing that I didn't know that I needed to consider, which I learned, was also my client's home and their space and what type of space they have available for the studio as well. I've had clients that live in apartment complexes, and that's a little bit more of a challenge. So usually I'll try to get their information. I'll be like, hey, can you tell me where you live? Do you live in a house? Do you live in an apartment? Is it a cul-de-sac? Like those are part of my intake questions. So that way I know, okay, how do I need to plan this out? And if it's not doable, then I will often suggest like we meet at a park or somewhere where it's still kind of private. We still have that space, but it gives me the opportunity to be able to have more space to be able to pull in, and we can meet in the studio that way. So it's definitely been a learning experience. There's a lot of things that I didn't anticipate going into it that I had to learn. But at the same time, it's like the best decision that I made though. Like I think it has been a great asset to my business. And it's been such a huge help for the people that I serve. Like I said, they don't have to worry about, how am I going to get to a session, because with art therapists, we're kind of far and few in between. And so, a client may have to travel a good little distance in order to see a therapist. And I actually serve 3 counties. I not only serve Pinellas County, but also serve Hillsborough and Hernando County. And so, again, because there's not a ton, there are some more art therapists locally, but again, we're still kind of spread out. So for a client, it could be a little difficult to be able to find someone that's close to them. And so again, just being able to bring a whole art studio, to my client just makes things a little bit more convenient and easy for them.
Yeah, I would imagine. Oop, there's a little feedback. I would imagine that it also adds to what you're able to do in terms of serving the wider community at like different events. So for example, this past week, we were invited to like our local county's health fair for all of the county employees. They do a massive event every year. And we had a table like station, which was great. But I would imagine that would be so cool to be able to bring the actual studio to the event and have people come in, experience um, the whole magic of being in your studio would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have done some events where I brought the whole studio. It's great because in terms of the space, even though it's a pretty good space, it's not a good space for a lot of people. We can kind of comfortably get about, depending on the people's size, comfortably about 6 people in there. And so usually when I will do events like that, I'll actually set up a table and tent out in front of the studio. So that way, if we're making art, we can create outside of the space, but we can still have access to electricity. We still have access to running water. So if we're painting and we need to wash brushes and things like that, people all have to do is just walk inside the studio, get what it is that they're needing, and they can bring it back outside in front of the studio. So that's typically how I would set up that space if I'm doing an outdoor event like that. And it has worked really well. Again, it's very bright and colorful, so it does tend to like draw people's attention. So when they see it, they're a little curious as to like, okay, what's going on over there? So that helps to draw the crowd in a little bit.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I know I've seen the photographs of your trailer, and it's like a bright pink color. Definitely eye catching for sure.
Yes, it's very bright. Oh, it's even more brighter now because I did a whole different design on it. So it's very avant-garde, splatter. It's
fun.
Yeah, it's very eye-catching. Which I want to kind of bring that up because a lot of times I do get questions about that in terms of like confidentiality. And so it is a conversation that I do have with my clients ahead of time. And it has never been an issue. No one's been like, oh no, I don't want people. But I always offer like if that's something that you're worried about, we don't have to meet at the home. We can always meet in a public space. So that way they don't have to worry about, the studio being parked out in front of their house and people are kind of seeing it. Because it does have my business name on it and also my services that are listed on there. So when you get close enough from afar, you don't necessarily notice because people come up to me all the time and like, hey, are you doing dog grooming? I'm like, no. So that's
definitely not that.
So like, no. So they don't naturally think that it is what it is, which is good. But like I said, it does still have my business name on there, my services. So again, I do give them the option that if that is something that makes you uncomfortable, then we can meet in a public space and then it's less of a concern for them. But I've actually never had anyone feel concerned or anything about it. So
that's cool. I think we might be more concerned about that stuff as a profession than the clients are concerned about that. I know I've been like eagerly approached many times in public. Or I'm like, oh, I'm worried about it, but they're clearly not worried about it. But that's a really good thing to bring up. What are, if you're in a brick and mortar, obviously there are certain things that we have to attend to and maintain. What are like those kinds of considerations for having a mobile studio? What goes into maintaining that kind of space and particularly like the mechanical functionings of it because it's on wheels and I mean there's stuff involved, none that I really understand because I'm not mechanically inclined in that area, but what goes into maintaining a mobile practice?
So yes, that's another thing to take into consideration, which is something the person would typically have to take into consideration if they are mobile, regardless if they have a studio. So there is that same kind of maintenance if you're traveling, if you're on the road. So I do have to take into consideration with my, my business budget that, with tires, I be traveling so much, I go through tires pretty quickly. And so having to make sure, I have backup tires on hand. And then also on the inside, which is why light materials is the most helpful. Just again, over time, because of the movement of it, I do have to kind of go in and do some minor repairs. Like the ceiling will start to kind of sag a little bit. Because again, with the motion that's happening a lot, it just kind of, the material kind of vibrates and it can kind of shift it. So every now and then I do have to go in and just kind of do some maintenance. Over the years, I've had to do just unexpected maintenances just because my studio, I think it's a 1986, so she's pretty old. So she kind of requires a lot of maintenance just because she's old. And so things like that. However, I believe if someone got a newer one, they probably won't necessarily have those same kind of maintenance issues. But generally speaking, it's mainly the tires. That's a big thing. I have a generator, which is how I have electricity. So I have to kind of maintain my generator as well, make sure it has oil and gas. So again, still kind of similar things that you would do with your car. But in addition to your car, those are the things that you also want to take into consideration for your trailer. And again, like I said, if you can get something that you can drive, then it's just kind of the maintenance of the car itself versus with pulling, you have the car and you also have the trailer to just kind of take into consideration. But I do have to do maintenance pretty frequently on it. Simple maintenance, I would say probably once every like 4 or 5 months, I kind of will go in there, give it a good clean, do some paint touch-ups and, recaulking some areas just to make it look nice again. But like big maintenances, those are probably between every 6 to 8 months. Like I said, I have to get new tires and things like that. Just make sure the maintenance. But I'm very fortunate that my husband is more mechanically inclined. So usually I'll just say, babe, there's something going on with it. Can you go check it out? And he'll just kind of tend to it. And if he can't do it, then he'll be like, all right, we're going to send it to professionals and let them take care of it. So I'm very fortunate in that regard.
Was there ever a time that you were looking at having a physical location, or has it always been your vision to be mobile?
No, actually, it was definitely my plan in the beginning to have a brick and mortar. But like I said, as I was kind of formulating my business and really kind of thinking about my business values and the missions that I had for my business, I was really trying to consider like, what can I do to make my services accessible? And like I said before, a brick and mortar is great. But again, if you have people that are a little bit more sparse, it could be a little bit more of a challenge. And the populations that I serve, especially those that I've worked with in Pinellas County, sometimes that can be a struggle. That can be a hard thing for a person in order to be able to receive services. And I never want something like that to be the reason why a person doesn't get services that they really need. And so it is my plan to still one day have a brick and mortar. I actually want to keep both. I do want to have a more solid space because traveling a lot can be tiresome as well. Being on the road a lot. So you do have to be one of those people that enjoy driving and being on the road because it can get a little tiring, especially if you have a significant caseload of people that you're seeing. And speaking of that, just another tip, be very strategic about your clients. Obviously, you have to work within the what your clients are capable in their schedule, but be as strategic as you possibly can. So like I said, I serve 3 counties. So I try not to stress myself out by trying to be in all 3 counties on one day.
Oh, no.
That could be a lot. So I try to see if I'm in St. Pete, I try to see my clients that are in St. Pete on that same day. Or even if I have to do Tampa, Hillsborough, I'll try to go to St. Pete first and then finish up in Tampa and then head home. So I'm very strategic about how I lay out my schedule and my availability because I don't want to burn myself out by just kind of being all over the place in any one given day. Because again, that could be a lot just being on the road and, these areas that I'm in are fairly populated. And so there could be a lot of traffic and things like that. So I highly recommend that if this is something that you're interested in doing, be very strategic about, how you set up your schedule, and how you go about seeing your clients, just so that you can have some, some balance and, kind of ease some of your own stresses in any given day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A long time ago, a very long time ago, I did in-home services, and it was all mostly in my county and one other county. And that was what was so hard, would be like driving an hour or 45 minutes in between one client's home and another client's home. And then the amount of time that you're on the road, um, plus the amount of time that you're seeing clients, plus all of the other things that you have to do clinically with documentation, you
Mhm.
end up really stacking on a lot of extra, hours into your work week. And you're right, it was really stressful. And of course, the agency that I worked at, they weren't being very strategic. They were like, here's a smattering of clients all over. See them all somehow.
Yeah,
Um,
work a miracle.
so that makes a lot of sense, especially
Mhm.
in a densely populated area like where you are, where the traffic is really awful.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned that part of having the mobile practice really relates to some of your like mission and vision and values of how you structured your business. Can you
Mhm.
share a little bit about what those are and kind of how you've designed everything with that in mind in the way that you practice? Because I think that it's a really excellent example of how we can really be true to who we are,
Mhm.
but also true to our mission to serve in the way that we want to serve. I don't think there's any right way to serve. There's multiple ways.
Mhm.
Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. So when I started my business, like I said, I really was trying to take into consideration what I can do to be the most helpful for the people that I'm serving. And in addition to, making, some of the barriers like transportation be less of a barrier, I also had to take into consideration the cost of my services and how I can go about um, offering my services in an economical way, but also still taking into consideration that I have my own personal responsibilities that I need to take care of as well. And so, one of the things that has been probably the most beneficial thing that I've been able to do is just collaborations with other people in the community. I've managed to partner with a lot of either individuals or other community organizations. So that way I'm able to go into these spaces and provide services to the people that I work with. So again, I predominantly work with adolescents and young adults. And so I try to find spaces where, like teenagers are already going to be able to provide my services. And so like I've been able to partner with the city of St. Petersburg in order to be able to go into like community centers, rec centers, things like that, to be able to provide services. And so in that arrangement, the organization is the one who actually covers the cost of the services, whereas the adolescents
Mm.
who are there, they're pretty much able to receive the services either at no cost or very low cost to them. Um, and then that way, and it also benefits me because I'm offering a group service, which most clinicians will know that that could be a very economical way of providing services, and still being able to receive what it is that you need to receive in order
Mhm.
to be financially secure. And so I've been able to do things like that. I've also been able to work with other organizations where we really kind of think outside of the box, like how we're able to offer services. So we do a lot of community type events. Um, Last year, we did an event called Catharsis, and we're actually in the process of
Mm.
creating this year's Catharsis event that I'm really looking forward to. And that's going to be mid July. And so at that event, we're very we're community oriented, and we're also taking into consideration how can we offer a therapeutic benefit to the people who may show up to this event. And we're able to offer events like this free because, again, the organizations that we're partnering with are able to cover the cost of these services. So the people who are joining, it's totally free to them. It's in the community. They're able to just to kind of pop up and show up, to these events. And so we're very intentional, and we understand these are not therapy services, but we still are very intentional about making them as therapeutic to people who are participating. So we're very intentional about the activities that we're doing. We're very intentional about creating the space so people can, just kind of share their experiences together as a group, kind of talk about what they got out of that experience, how that experience benefited them, in terms of their mental well-being and just their overall health and feeling connected to their community. And so I've been able to do things like that. I also have been able to do pop-up groups. And I've also partnered with another organization called Nomad. They're such a great organization because they are very much out in the community. They have done, and so it's kind of where I got the idea to do my pop-up shops. They've done like groups in the community called them micro camps. And so they go into these communities with artist presence and they set up, and kids are able to come and create art. And so I pretty much kind of do the same thing. So again, I still have a more of a conscious therapeutic plan behind what it is that I'm doing when I'm able to, just kind of set up in these spaces. So I'm a little bit more intentional, like, okay, I want it to be this way, but still with the idea that, again, it's not therapy that I'm doing in these spaces, but I am providing a therapeutic, benefit for them, just to be able to engage. Like I said, there's a lot of community collaboration that's happening with the individuals that are participating. I'll do a lot of activities that kind of require them to work together as a community in order to create together and really. And I like to process too. Like I like to check in with everybody, kind of get a sense of where everybody's at, how they're feeling. And I like to check out with them and just ask them, what was this experience like for you? Was it, helpful for you? What did you get out of it? So that way people have the opportunity to just a little bit process what it is that they experienced and what they were able to get out of it. And so I really try to think outside of the box in terms of how I'm providing my services. Like I said, I'm really trying to take, the people that I'm trying to serve, I'm trying to think about what their needs are and how I can best meet their needs. But still, like I said, in a way that still is beneficial to me in the sense that, I'm not burning myself out by not taking my own needs into consideration. But really just trying to figure out how can I do things differently. Like I had the opportunity to work with the Museum of Fine Arts. And so we created what were called mood tours. And so the idea was that people can come into the museum and they can engage in these mood tours and engage in the art that was present in the museum at that time. And it just allowed them to connect on a more personal level and allowed them to kind of ask themselves like, how is this art that I'm viewing affecting me? And we kind of categorized it. So we had things that were related to like anxiety. We had things related to anger and frustration. So we had these different moods. And the idea was that the person would be able to go through this process, experience the art, connect to the art, connect to their emotions, and then there was an art exercise attached to it. So then they can either at that moment choose to create some art, or they can later on when they got home, they could, create some art just to kind of process and concrete that experience that they had, with the hopes that by the time they went through that experience, they had a positive experience. They had a positive interaction with that emotion that they were wanting to really kind of, express and kind of work through. So I just, like I said, it's been a lot of different things. And like I said, I just really try to collaborate with as many people as possible. I like to hear other people's ideas and I try to think to myself, okay, how can we make this therapeutic? How can we, And so that's just been kind of one of the goals of my business that I've been trying to do over the past few years. And, we've been pretty successful with, our efforts. And like I said, we've been able to work and connect with people in a different way. And we're able to meet people where they're at, and to be able to, again, provide based upon what they need and not necessarily what we think they need. It's definitely a collaboration even with the community, because like I said, we like to ask them for their feedback, ask them how this experience was for them in order to then make it better for them as we move forward in the future. So
it sounds like an important part of your mission is engaging the community in a positive way, exposing them to the arts, giving them positive experiences that are connecting as well, that they're connecting with one another, connecting with you, connecting with the art. And in doing so, I think you're breaking down barriers that people may have about what it means to participate in therapy or what therapy is. You're giving them a therapeutic experience, and you're giving them an opportunity by processing with them, asking them, like, what did you get out of this? What did you learn from it? What did you notice? Like, you're allowing them to come to their own conclusions about how therapy could potentially be beneficial to them should they decide to engage in more, exclusive independent services besides what you're doing to expose them in your community efforts.
Absolutely. To me, I see it as like bridging the gap. It's creating a space for people, that in between space for people to get a little bit more comfortable with it. Hopefully, kind of change their mindset around it. See it as something that I can actually enjoy this process, because in my own research and talking to people, one of the things that is a barrier for people is that they're like, well, I don't think I'm gonna like it. Like, I don't think I'm gonna enjoy it. And and I tell people, like, therapy is still therapy. So there's going to be times that it's not going to be the most fun. But I don't think that needs to be the case all the time. Like, I think people can actually have a positive experience and enjoy themselves, and it opens them to the idea. And if they can be supported, they can build that relationship with the people that they're connecting with. They're able to do those hard things because they feel like, okay, this person I've been able to connect with, this person is able to meet me where I'm at and recognize my needs and listens to me and is willing to co-collaborate with me. So that way I feel like, I have a say in what it is that I'm experiencing and what it is that I'm going through. And so I just really like to see it as a bridge to really kind of help move people in that direction. And I've actually gotten several clients from these events that I've done. I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, I really like what you're doing. I've been thinking about doing some therapy. I never even knew what art therapy was. And, so they get
That's
introduced
awesome.
to it. Yeah. And they're like, I think that this is something that I really would enjoy. Like, I feel like art therapy would suit me a little bit more than just, talk therapy. I don't want to talk, but I love art and I love to create. And so again, it's just a way to just kind of create that space for people to kind of move into and get a little bit more comfortable. And the ultimate goal is, like I said, to be able to help them to feel comfortable with moving into therapy if that's something that they really need and they feel like they're ready to do. But these services that I get to offer in these different ways, I really do feel like it helps to kind of make that transition for people a little bit more easy and a little bit more intriguing for them to consider it.
Yeah. What is the percentage of time that you are doing those types of things in your business versus the individual therapies? Are these things that are like planned out throughout the year, once in a while? I know you talked about some things being like pop-up events. Do you have a strategy for that, of like how much time one should be engaging in like the group community activities versus the more individual work that you do as well?
Mm-hmm. So for me, and I honestly, I think it really depends on the individual and just kind of what their goal and how their business is structured. Because I also see this as great marketing. Like this, like to me, I feel like
Mhm.
the best way to be known is to get out there in the community so people can see you and
Mhm.
interacting. Because it's one thing to be there and just kind of a face, but it's another thing to engage with people and really start to connect. Because I think that's the start of building that rapport with people. You know, if people see you at events, if they've been able to interact with you on a more like a social level, they're more comfortable with you versus someone that they just kind of like, okay, well, I'm looking for this person and I found them online. Not to say that doesn't work, because I have people find me that way too.
Of
But I
course.
find that being out there in the community is what draws people in. So I also see it as part of like my marketing strategy. So I would say for an individual, they will have to take that into consideration. But for me, when I started my business was more meant to be group oriented, and less individual based. But when I
Okay.
started my business, COVID happened. And so people weren't meeting in groups. And so
Mm.
I had to pivot, which is why I started seeing individuals. But I've been actually trying to move my business back more in the direction of more group oriented type things. So for me, my individual caseload, I don't keep a very high
Mhm.
individual caseload, because I do prefer to be more out in the community, doing more groups and things like that. So for my business and what it is that works best for me, I tend to do a lot of that, and I try to do as much of that as I possibly can.
Mhm.
But I am strategic because, like I said, I still have my individual clients, and um, like I was saying before when we jumped on, is that summertime is actually the busiest for me because again, doing groups and things like that, I have more opportunities to do those
Mm.
community events. I have more opportunity to do those things because people are out more. People are kind of engaging in social, events and things like that. So, for me, around this time of the year is when I'm really like leaning into those things. Whereas kind of like more winter, fall, people are a little less out and social. So I'll, tend to see a little bit more individual clients during that time. But for me, I try to maintain a healthy balance because I really do enjoy individual work, but I love group work. And so I try to find a good balance that works for me. And so, like I said, it really would just depend on the clinician and just kind of what their
Mhm.
goals are and how they would want to structure things. But at the very least, I still think that these are great marketing ways. I think these are great tools to use in order to be more out there, people to see your face and people to interact with you more, which can bring in more individual clients for you if that's your goal is to predominantly do individuals.
I love that. I think, sometimes marketing can feel so intimidating, or people have an idea like, "Oh, I need to know how to do social media and I hate social media," or, they know they need a website, but doing the website feels intimidating, and maybe they're not in a financial position to invest in having that developed for them. But to go out in our community and set up and provide an experience, I feel like that's something that is accessible to all of us as
Mhm,
creative therapists. There's
mhm,
ways that we can do that. And you're right. I feel like that personal touch point um, matters so much and makes a huge difference. Um, and it starts to build, I think, your reputation in the community, as you were saying,
mhm,
but it creates like generational clientele
mhm.
as well.
Absolutely. Mhm.
If you're setting up a business, I would think you, as a practice owner, I couldn't imagine like, I'm going to set up this practice and in 3 years I'm going to be gone. Like that just seems like,
Right.
that's too much. I think most of us are in it to set it up to last the course of our career.
Mhm,
So it just seems like such a worthwhile investment in doing building those collaborative relationships and engaging the community in different experientials that are meaningful for them. Maybe it's like more therapy light, like you're talking about. but it gives people the experience. It allows them to connect with you and build a relationship with you, which hopefully they go back and tell other people about.
Yep, absolutely. And for me, I get a lot out of it because and I kind of feel like a lot of us creative people like to think creatively. Like we don't necessarily like to kind of do the same thing over and over again. We're kind of thinking about like, what else can I be doing? And so I love the way I've been able to structure my business because, you know, I get to do different things. I get to try out new things. I get to have these different experiences. And so for me personally, like I love it. Like I don't get bored. Like there's no room for me to get bored. And I won't say that burnout's not a possibility because that is definitely a possibility, but I feel like it can be a little less for me because again, I'm not doing that same thing over and over again. I'm getting to do new things. So there's like new experiences we had. You know, I'm learning a lot, you know, especially like when I worked with the museum, like I had never, you know, done something like that before. So it was such a great learning experience and a great opportunity. And so I personally just really enjoy, you know, being able to do these different out of the box things because they're just really interesting to me. And I get to learn a lot from the people that I'm collaborating with because I get to see things from their perspective, but they also get to see things from my perspective. Because I also tend to collaborate with a lot of artists, a lot of artists that are working in the community. And so for me, I enjoy that because they too have a mental wellness mindset. The things that they're doing in the community is this idea. But I also enjoy being able to come in as an art therapist just to make sure that we are helping and not doing anything that could potentially be harmful. And so a lot of times I get to do, you know, kind of like some consultation work and I get to say, hey, like, how about we try this instead? Or how about we approach it in this kind of way? You know, so that way it's kind of like a win-win for everybody. Like we're all out there serving our community and we're doing it in the best possible way to benefit the most amount of people. And so again, for me, it just works, you know, and I understand this is not for everybody. I know there's some people that's probably watching, they're just like, oh my God, no. And I get that, and that's okay. It's not for everybody, but for me, I love it. Like I said, there's never, you know, I don't get bored. You know, there's always something new, something different to be done. You know, and I really love it. I enjoy it.
With the collaborations, because clearly you've collaborated in a variety of ways with the city, with the museum, with different artists that have a particular way that they serve the community. How have you built those relationships? Were these people that you knew in the community, or were these people you reached out to, or did they reach out to you? How does that work?
So for me, it was in the beginning, it was definitely a lot of like reaching out and just kind of putting myself out there. It was a lot of education because, you know, even today, people still don't always know what art therapy is and what it is that I do. So it was a lot of educating, but people were really excited, especially because, like I said, I work with teenagers and people are always looking for, you know, creative and different ways to engage teenagers. And so, you know, for me, it was just a lot of making those connections and kind of putting myself out there. And then it was once I made those connections, then those people also helped to put me in front of other people. And they'd be like, oh, I know this person. They will love what you're doing. You should talk to them. Here's their information, you know, and then I would just kind of reach out that way. And then too, a lot of times it was just being in the same circles with people, you know, especially in St. Pete. St. Pete is a big city, but it's a small city at the same time. And everybody kind of knows everybody. And so that's a benefit in the sense that if you're kind of running in the same circles, especially in the world of mental health, you know, there's, you know, an even smaller circle. And so it kind of worked out that I was able to get connected with people through just the people that I was already connected with and start to be able to build those relationships that way as well. And so, but in the beginning, I had to put myself out there. I had to really, you know, and I was also very fortunate because St. Pete is home for me. I was born and raised there. My parents were born and raised there. And my dad, he's had his own business pretty much my whole life. And so he knows a lot of people in the city. So he also kind of helped put me in front of a lot of people, especially people that were part of the city, which is why I was able to get those connections. So that was very helpful too, especially in the beginning. Because believe it or not, I'm an introvert and I don't really like doing those kinds of things. But I recognize that it's a necessity. So I just kind of, I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it. And I just kind of put myself out there and just, and it's been great. Like I said, I've made some really great relationships, and I've been able to do some really great things. But you do have to kind of be willing to put yourself out there and meet people in order to really make those connections.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful for listeners that are just getting started and like they feel intimidated by it. But I have in my experience, when I do reach out to people, for the most part, people really want to help. And
Mhm.
they really do want to, most people want to collaborate. Most people want to support what we're doing. And I've had similar experiences where people are like, I can't really help you in this, but here's this person who can,
Mhm.
and different opportunities open up, which are really wonderful. And to be able to collaborate and receive funds from the city and to work with the museum, I think those are really unique opportunities that as an art therapist we have access to, where other mental health practitioners may have a harder time
Mhm.
um, kind of reaching in and expanding into those spaces and places.
Absolutely. And I think that that's the beauty of like the creative arts is that in my efforts to think outside of the box, I think that's just kind of where we're moving as a people, to be able to do things differently, to kind of do things in a non-traditional way. And so I do find that people are really receptive to what it is that I'm doing, because they're like, okay, what we were doing is not really working, so let's try something new, let's try something different. And
Mhm.
so I find that people are very intrigued. They are like, this is because, again, most people, their goal is to help, like they want to help, but they recognize that maybe I don't have the capacity to do it in the way that you have the capacity to do it. And so they want to then collaborate because they want to help in the best way that they possibly can. And like I said, because, with the creative arts, it really does allow people to try something different, to experience something different, and have a whole new experience with mental health and mental well-being. And so I find that, yeah, people are really, they're really receptive. Like they're really like, I like what you're doing, I like what it is that you're wanting to do, and how can I help, like how can I be a part of this, because I think it's great. And I think people are going to be more intrigued and interested in trying it, because it is something different, it is something, non-traditional in the sense of what people have always thought mental health to be. And so it really does create a space for people to just to kind of tap in other parts of themselves and to experience themselves and others in a different way that just feels a little new and exciting to people. And that's why I think a lot of the events that we do tend to be so successful, because people are really intrigued by them. Like they're really just like,
Mhm.
okay, this is different, and so it piques their curiosity and they just really kind of want to experience it and try it out. And like I say, we do have the mindset, especially when I'm working with these individuals, even though we know all the time things aren't going to be a great experience, but it is still always our goal to make sure people have a good experience, because we know if a person has a good experience, they're more likely to want to do it again. So we
Yeah.
really do try to make these experiences as enjoyable as possible for people. And even if they're hard things, making space for people to really just express themselves is another way of people still wanting to come back, because people want to be seen, people want to be heard, people want to be able to express themselves. And so just simply creating those spaces for people to do that, even that just kind of draws people in and make them want to participate and do more of it.
Yeah, I love that. Love that a lot. So, for folks that are listening that may want to learn more about you and your practice, or may want to reach out and connect with you, where can they find more information about you and where to reach you, Jasmine?
Mhm. So my website, they can start there, which is www.ltyart.com. So that's short for listen to your art.com. People can also simply email me. I can be reached at Jasmine Parker at ltyart.com. And people can also follow me on my Instagram, which is LTYArt_TES. And so I post a lot of things there as well. So people are welcome to follow and reach out to me in any of those platforms.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time today to share with listeners all that you've been doing and about what makes your practice so special and unique. And I hope it inspires other people to see that it is within their reach if they're thinking it would be awesome to be able to have a mobile trailer or a bus or some type of mobile practice, rather than, unlike like me, I have everything in the back of my vehicle like crammed in. Art studio and having to like pull everything in and out. But I hope that it does inspire other people who are considering that as a possibility, to see that it's viable and doable. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Right. I'm going to remove us and air our ending. So thank you all so much for listening. This is the last episode and we'll be returning in August. So I hope you all have a great summer. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe at the Creative Psychotherapist 6240 on YouTube if you haven't done that, or follow us on Spotify, Google, listening, wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate your support and we'll be back with you in the fall.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Creative Psychotherapist. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For show notes, downloads, and additional resources, head over to the website at www.creativeclinicianscorner.com.